All right, everyone, we're going to get started a few minutes early because we are doing very good with time, and maybe we can get out a little bit early. So my favorite part of today's discussion and presentation series is impact. And for this, I'm going to be doing a lot of reading because I put a little bit of thought into what I was going to say, and I just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. And I, unfortunately, will not be looking at the audience too much, so just bear with me for that. So when we think about impact and digital curation and digital libraries, the kinds of things to think about here are some of the things. How does the work involving digital transformation today, which is what we're doing, creating, transforming, make a positive contribution to the society, or any kind of contribution? And what impact can it have? It can have a positive impact, it can have a negative impact, it can have a neutral impact. And what are the possibilities of the applications of these digital objects in primary source sets that we have sitting in our collections today? And are they meant to just warm up their wonderful, beautiful spots in a browse view in a collection, or is there more to it than that? Is there more to the story than that? So, to think about digitization in a simplistic way, to understand it, strip it down, we're getting into the content, into a format that we can put inside, hopefully a digital repository of some sort, and then we store it there, and then we want to be able to go back and access it later. And this should get us thinking about how do we deliver this content when we make that request to find it from that box. What format or delivery method is used? And once we know that and we're able to access that content, it becomes useful to us. And it could become useful to us in very different ways. And how do we define what is useful? Well, in some ways, it really depends on the audience that is trying to request this digital object. And the way that this digital mass is being used would be the way it would then impact the audience. I don't know if that makes sense. But sometimes what we have in a particular digital collection today, we have no idea what kind of impact it's going to have 20 years down the road. So we need to be prepared for that. So if you think about it, we start by identifying our digital objects in our special collections, or in our museums, in our research rooms. And then we start the curation process, and then we start looking for funding for digitization, and then we're adding the tags or the metadata, and then we create a digital collection. Perhaps we also have a preservation system to go along with it. So an example of this, a simple work that was done in a collection for just the normal digitization process with normal tagging, let's say, is the Utah American Indian Digital Archive. So when it was first created many, many years ago, I believe it's over 10 years old at least, we thought we were just digitizing and preserving these oral histories, and we were adding metadata to them, and then these objects were sitting in the UAIDA collection. But then later on, people from, let's say, the Department of Education came and said, hey, we want to partner with UAIDA, we want to partner with Marriott Library, and we want to partner with the Board of Education, and we want to integrate these sets into the into curriculum and use this in classrooms. So the oral histories now are perhaps being used in a classroom to learn and actually to teach children about history of, let's say, the Shoshone tribe. And it's actually a real example. But imagine if we really didn't have proper tags for this collection back at the time, then the impact may not have been the way it was able to impact us today, that particular collection. So this photograph, by the way, it is from DPLA, National Museum of American History. And it is, I think, part of General Motors collection as a sub-collection. And they developed this product, which is a T-shirt, after they created an emission-free battery car. And they were talking about the impact of that work in society. Just if you're curious. Okay. So Impact, of course, if you kind of rewind a little bit, it all starts with digitization. And this is a question that a lot of people have been asking me, so I just kind of put a slide up here for this, because we need to know where to go to get our primary source sets digitized in a way that we don't have to touch it again. We want to do it right the first time. So Mountain West Digital Library right now is actually compiling a resource, and Liz Woolcott has sent out a call for volunteers to serve on this task force that is going to be looking at a good hosting solution to park the resources, and also adding information about best practices, about trainings that we've developed in-house in our local community, in our partner community. And there's the bulk digitization subgroup that presented yesterday, and they talked about how they're developing their own resource and adding information about what are the different types of equipment that are available in the Mountain West Digital Library community. So you should be able to say, hey, I have a collection of, that's a 16mm film, and I should be able to go here, central resource, and then go to a sub-resource and see where do I need to go to get some help with preserving a digitization or digitizing that kind of file format. Ray Matthews, I don't know if he's here, I think he may have left for the day. So he facilitated this ULA session, and actually I was a part of that, where he pulled some people from the community, and we talked about the same kind of thing. Where do you want to go? Where do you start with digitization? I had some questions today. Well, we have some very simple paper files of photographs, but we really don't even have a way of finding what we want to look for. So they're in the process of digitization right now, or digitizing. So what is the next step for us? So we should be able to go and look at hosting solutions, and where do we want to go to find funding for our work, and where do we want to go to learn about digital preservation, and then what do we want to do about metadata? And for impact down the road, we don't know how this is going to affect our children and our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren tomorrow. We want to be able to apply best metadata standards as we know of them today with information that we have at hand. So, and if you're interested in joining that task force, please contact Liz. She's also looking for a co-chair right now, right? And there is quite a bit of work, because there's this coordination that needs to happen among the partners of the Mountain West Digital Library community, because all of us have been compiling our own resources, but we want a central place to begin with. So going back to impact, we think about digital exhibits. So this on the left over here is the digital exhibits page on the DPLA website. And we can read over here, DPLA is defining their exhibits as stories of national significance drawn from source materials in libraries, archives, and museums. So this is another example of pulling objects that are contributing to a particular theme from various different sources. So a particular theme here for primary source sets, but coming from various partners and various collections. So again, good metadata is important. And so, objects that were once sitting in silos in their own collections are now become part of something larger and has a bigger impact and a different kind of impact than what they were first intended for. I'd like to actually highlight the work that Anna Neer-Trower has been doing on digital exhibits using Omeka, and she actually has a few things to say about that as well.
I do have a few things to say, and I will say that. So I think for digital exhibits, one thing that's kind of tricky is what does Google Analytics mean? What happens when something maybe blows up a tiny bit? For us, when we got some national and local press for Century of Black Mormons, our hits went from maybe 0 to around 250, 300 a day. And so it'll be interesting to see as things settle down what our analytics are on that site. And as this was happening to us, I was thinking about USU's extremely extensive exhibits platform and wondering what their analytics are. We have 5 exhibits up. I don't know how many USU has. Is it 50, 40? It's a lot. And I know that there are other folks who are maybe just kind of on the verge of thinking, maybe I'm doing my first exhibit right now, or maybe I want to figure out how to put together an exhibits program at my library. So the thing that I'm proposing, and I can help facilitate and send out a doodle poll or something about this, but for those of us that are particularly interested in digital exhibits and maybe sharing some analytics for our existing digital exhibits programs, as well as kind of going around and giving some information for people who are just trying to get up and running with that, maybe we can have kind of an informal virtual discussion down the road, maybe in the fall. Shoot me an email, maybe I'll send out an email to MWDL News and we can get something like this going.
Great, thank you so much for that. Another project I would like to highlight for the impact theme is right here, which is the work that Amy Hunsaker at University of Nevada, Reno has been working on with some very unique digital exhibits, actually. So this project started out as a very simple project involving photography of local street art. And I was just talking to her about this yesterday over at dinner. And I thought, wow, this is a very unique project, and we really need to be talking about this, and it really goes well with our impact theme. It started off as a local photography project. People are just going around photographing local street art, and then it morphed into an unplanned and a wonderful virtual reality exhibit. And it has really deeply engaged the public as well, right? The local public, the local community, sorry. So Amy will talk a little bit more about this.
Yeah, Kinza asked if I'd be willing to talk about this project, and would I? I'm very excited about this. I heard a librarian from UCLA talk about their punk rock project about, my gosh, a year and a half ago. And it's very similar to what we did. Now, Reno, if you've been there, we're kind of a remote place, but we've been going through a population explosion. Tesla built their factory there. Now suddenly we have all of these, it's a tech hub, plus it's this little town. And so we have a lot of gentrification going on. And you have these traditional neighborhoods that have decorated their streets with this artwork that is special to them. But in the meantime, you have a completely new group coming in, and these people crave their own kind of street art. They love these neighborhoods because they have the murals on the walls and like the electrical boxes. It's a very arty community. They're heavily involved in Burning Man, for example. So you have a lot of the Burning Man installations that go out to the desert. They are created and housed in Reno before they go out to the playa, and then when they come back, they often live there. So you have this really crazy yet ephemeral art scene going on. So when I heard this lady talk about the UCLA punk rock project, I was like, we need to do that in Reno. And it's very interesting, the parallels. In the punk rock project, they had a hard time getting the punk rockers to trust the academic librarians. Does this surprise you? Hello, we're your local university and we want you to trust us with all your things. So we had to, the entire process was fascinating because I actually had the good luck to hire somebody from the community who had recently finished her master's degree in Chicano urban art, and she knew people in the community. So we got our toe in the door that way. So we started photographing these images and just creating a regular archive. And then we had recently we'd also recently got a grant to create a VR studio. And the person in charge of the VR studio was looking for stuff to do. And so he thought that this would be an interesting way to also, digitally preserve this culture that, again, is very ephemeral. And we became even more engaged with the artists. And I hired somebody to be the project manager for this. And I highly suggest that if somebody wants to do something similar, because she was out on the street all day long, talking to people and going into the stores and saying, wow, who painted that mural? And finding out more. So we actually integrated ourselves into this community, and these underground artists, once we gained one person's trust, we would get more. And some of them wanted to remain anonymous, but we would interview them. And part of the VR experience is we interviewed the artists. So you put on the headset and you're standing on the street. The artist appears next to you and talks about their artwork. It is really amazing. And so we have marketed that to people that are involved in the art movement. We put up a pop-up display downtown in the area so that people could experience it. And we're hoping that we will be able to include the 360 video in our new repository too. But you know, the thing that I love is that we are having an event next week and we have an RSVP. We have all of these people coming to the university for the first time ever. Reno is not a big town, and people are into the wolf pack and like the sports and that sort of thing, but actually getting some of these community members into the library is a great thing. And the other aspect that I really love about this is a lot of times libraries and universities, we have the opportunity to get things that are very expensive or inaccessible to the public, and you know, like our VR studio. Not everybody has a state-of-the-art VR studio. You know, we spent $100,000 on equipment. But this is a way we can kind of give back to the community, because the work that we're doing is very meaningful. People love their street art. It's part of them. And I wasn't going to talk this long, but
no,
a little excited.
No, thank you so much for talking.
It is kind of cool, yeah.
It's a great project. I hope we get the collection in Mountain West. Right? We won't be able to have the VR interface, of course.
We have the 2D images.
All right, that would be great.
So you please have the 2D images once it's parsed.
Yes. Thank you for that. Some great work that's going on. I've used this slide before in other presentations when I think about technology and digital libraries. So, and I like to bring this up again here for a reason, because if we're talking about impact, we're talking a lot about metadata, but sort of looking to the future about what's going to happen. So we know, you know, we're collecting our data, we're sort of marking that check mark by data collection, transformation, we know how to store it. But you know, sometimes we're just not taking enough time with the metadata, and I cannot emphasize that enough. And a simple example that I can give you is, we would never do this because we know metadata much better than that, but if we had photographs from Utah, if the metadata said Utah, so you know, 10 years from now, people wanted to learn more about Utah, they could pull that information. Now, if it didn't say Utah parks, then you know, we wouldn't be able to incorporate that into research for Utah and parks. So, and we don't even know how we're going to be trying to extract all of that information down the road and what that information is going to mean to us. And then sometimes you have an existing resource, and what we find, it clumps together with that resource and it becomes something even more, and that becomes part of even a larger thing. So the impact can just morph and keep growing, but it's starting with all of the wonderful work we're doing today in our libraries as simple digital objects. Right. So it's like the work we're doing in the Digital Library Kitchen, you know. The simple analogy I can have, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we can try to, you know, add all of the ingredients we possibly can that are available to us today to create that dish, so that in the future it can be used in many different ways and it can be tasted by many communities and many people and many guests. So as hors d'oeuvres and as, you know, your main entree and whatnot. All right, so this is really it. I did want to put a slide up about digital humanities here too, because when we talk about impact, we also need to think about the digital humanists, you know, and digital libraries play an important role for humanists in general, because libraries provide access to their original source materials to people that are doing the research. And we are the sort of, you know, we're holding the, we're standing at the door and saying, hey, we have this content, and people are reaching out to us and saying, hey, we need to have access to the content so we can do all this research. And also there's because, I mean, right now we're seeing in an academic institution there's so much digital content that's being produced through the teaching that's happening around here, through the learning that's happening around here, and we need to know what to do with it. And we're trying to understand what kinds of technologies we need to be using to actually use the technology as a catalyst to then do something with the data, or to try to have that kind of interaction with it that is meaningful, and to be able to do that. So for now, that is all. And I think we want to hold the questions till the end of the impact theme. And we're going to go into, next is reuse, and that's Liz. Right.
Okay, so I've been part of a project team that received an IMLS grant starting last July and just ended June 30th to start looking into how digital library assessment can happen and what things we would need to have a toolkit to make it easiest for all of us to do assessment practices. See here. Just so you know, I am part of a group of 6, and everyone has contributed so much work to this, so I wanted to make sure we give a shout out to everybody on this project. It's Santi Thompson, who's from the University of Houston, Elizabeth Kelly from Loyola University, Caroline Muia from University of Southern California, Jenny O'Gara from the Virtual Library of Virginia at George Mason University, and Ayla Stein-Kenfield, who's at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Now, if you haven't noticed, we hit every single time zone in the continental US, so we have meetings every 2 weeks, so this has been super fun to organize that. We also talk about this under the hashtag DigReuse when we're on social media, so you can find more information there. And down below, it's hard to see, it's reuse.diglib.org, which is where we have a website with all of our information. And that will come up again here later too if you didn't catch that. So one thing that we're doing is we came out of a DLF user and usability studies working group that put out a white paper back in 2015 that looked at what literature the digital library community had been putting out about usability. Now, the vast majority of all the literature was about UX, right? How people interact with your actual digital library. But there was nothing about, no good information about assessment or how users are reusing our content. So what we did is we broke off into a smaller group that went to actually start looking at this. And to set us up, I just wanted to define the difference between use and reuse. It's like splitting hairs, but as you get further along, it becomes important. So we define use as discovering and browsing objects in a digital repository, often described as downloads or clicks, without knowing the specific context for the use. That means that we, as the digital library people, don't know what that context is. We just know that somebody looked at it or downloaded it. So that would be web analytics or the analytics supplied by your content management system. So the difference between that and reuse is that reuse is how often and in what ways digital repository materials are utilized and repurposed, knowing the context of the use. So in this case, we know the context of the use. And the user always knows their own context, right? But this would be like, how many times is it shared on social media? And can you track those, how that goes through? Can you do reverse image lookup to find out where it's at, where it's living, how people are using it? If that still seems very intertwined, don't worry, we'll talk about this a little bit more so you can figure more about this out. Now, I have a ton of slides here, so I'm going to like breeze through them, but they'll be available for you guys to look at to get more details, and you can go to the website for more information too. So I'll tell you a little bit about our project, and then our project is really dependent on these sections right here. We sent out an initial survey about this. We conducted focus groups, which then led to us developing use cases, which then became another survey that we sent back out for the community to evaluate those use cases to see if we're on the right track. So about our project real quick, we are working under the DLF umbrella, and we received an Institute of Museum and Library Services grant to do this. We have a really amazing advisory board who helped guide us through this project, and our purpose is to create, not yet the toolkit. This is a planning grant, so we're actually developing the foundation for how we should develop a toolkit. So we're going to come up with the functional requirements that toolkit would need to have. We will be producing a paper, which will actually, I'll tell you about at the end. It ended up not being a white paper, ended up being published but open access for you all be able to use. We'll do a grant report and project data, and everything we have is available either on our website, which is reuse.diglib.org, or on an OSF repository, which you can also find at the website. Okay, so our initial survey was sent out to get us some baseline data. And what we wanted to do was just start gathering information about what people are currently doing. I gotta find my spot in here. And what they found were their biggest barriers. So we sent it out. We got 302 usable responses. It was kind of a lengthy survey because the questions were kind of intense, but we had 19 questions. Just if you want to see our demographics, most of the people, half of them were academics, and then we had public museum and all others. And luckily about 30% said that they served underserved populations. So the initial findings were that most people, 80%, collect use data. So this is, once again, Google Analytics that look at clicks and downloads. But only 40% collect reuse data, which is people going out and either doing reverse image lookup to see if someone else has pulled their content somewhere that their systems can't track, or if they're mostly using social media, so they track how many times something gets shared on Facebook and Twitter. The platforms that they're using this for, so once again, Use has an actual platform, Google Analytics, or their content management system. And they're most often, the data they collect the most is the number of visitors, the number of downloads, and the number of clicks. For reuse, the most common methods they use are the social media metrics, alert services, and reverse image lookup. But the most common data they collected was how many times it was cited in scholarship or published or replicated in physical medium, exhibits or books, that kind of thing. Most of the things, their obstacles to actually doing assessment for their library for both use and reuse is, unsurprisingly, time, staff, and money. No one has any of these things to do all these projects and also track them. But apart from those three things, which we can't help too much with, they lacked standards and expertise in tools. So what we did is we took that information from the initial survey and we created focus groups. We had 3 different topics. The one was just a general information gathering. We had a topic of standards and technologies and a topic of cultural and privacy issues. We actually did 2 groups per topic. One was in person, one was virtual. And we often had multiple sessions per group per topic. So it ended up being a lot. There were, I think we had 40 participants total and 10 different groups that were conducted. We did this starting in October, and we just concluded our last one in June, so we're still analyzing some of that data. Just so you know, about half of them were academic librarians, but we also try to pull in wherever possible as many public, museum, consortium, and other types of libraries. Just so you know, it is really hard to get participants for these focus groups. We had no idea. It took most of our time just to get people to agree to do this. So what we did is we held these focus groups, and then we were really dumb when we did our IRB. We said we would destroy the audio in 48 hours. Do not do this. This is bad. You spent all night coding stuff. So, but that's what we did. We kept to our IRB statement. So we took notes. We had to de-identify it, destroy the audio in 48 hours, and then code the notes from there. And then we generated use cases out of people's responses. So some examples of reuse that came up were things like metadata aggregation, digital exhibits, archiving websites, and so on. There was lots of different examples, way broader than what we had anticipated there being. What respondents identified as the most important things are, once again, metadata. That's your theme for the, apart from impact, is also metadata for this whole conference. But not just metadata, sticky metadata. So that means that it stays with the digital item across platforms. How many times have you done metadata, embedded it in an object, and uploaded it into Content DM or Facebook or anything else, and it strips everything, right? Or at least your downloadable file doesn't contain that information. So that was identified as an issue. They also needed data dashboards. Unique identifiers for digital objects were very important for this. They wanted standards and training. So They wanted to know how to turn their data into impact statements. That seems to be where everybody is stuck. We can gather data, we don't know how to interpret it or how to share it in a meaningful way with our stakeholders. And then they were also interested in sharing, so knowing kind of what Anna was talking about, being able to compare analytics across institutions so we can either benchmark or know if we're hitting around the areas we need to. Okay, so what we did is we took, those are some of the identified needs, but we built them into use cases, and then we put them back into a survey. So I'm going to tell you what the use cases were really quick, and then I'll tell you about our follow-up survey. So we had 3 groups of use cases. One was the data collection, analysis, and reporting. The second was privacy rights, management, and ethics, and then collection development. So our use cases, and I've kind of highlighted because we got really wordy on these, but the first one is just knowing how content is being reused. The second is finding best practices documentation. The third was employs qualitative and quantitative methods to collect reuse data. Another use case was how to generate reports. One was benchmarking, and then telling stories of impact. So we didn't put those in any sort of order in the survey. We had it randomized so that people would select what's most important to them. Under privacy rights and management, our use cases were wanting to know who our users are, wanting to find instances of illegal, unethical, or exploitative reuse, identifying platforms where reuse content is occurring for commercial or marketing gain. That was actually a common complaint. Wanting to enable or encourage attribution of our materials, and providing ability for marginalized communities to report incidents of reuse that the community perceives as culturally exploitative. And then under collection development, we only had 2 use cases. One was to identify the strengths and gaps in our digital collections, and the other one was to inform digitization projects and priorities. Okay, so we took those use cases and we put them into a survey and we sent that back out. Just as a comparison, we had fewer questions. We got about 232 usable responses, which was about a 70% completion rate, which is actually fairly good, even though it was lower than the other one. We stayed about the same, except we had a lot more public library response, and over half of our respondents said that they served underserved populations. So once again, we asked about barriers to digital collection, and lack of time is the biggest one. And we took out money and staff because we can't do anything about that. But lack of established standards was the second biggest barrier, and then lack of tools, and then our system and software silos, right? The fact that they don't talk to each other, so it's hard to get analytics across the board. So for our use cases, what people ranked as the highest use case for data collection and analysis and response, it would be understanding how content is being reused. The second was wanting to tell stories of impact. And those 2 were clearly the top for those. In the collection development, it didn't really matter. They were very close. People want to talk about how to inform their digitization projects and also how to identify strengths and gaps in their collections. And then for privacy rights management and ethics, there was a clear front runner here. People wanted to enable and encourage attribution of their material. For the actual functionalities, how they wanted this toolkit to function, ironically, even though back here, let's see if I can find it, right down here is best practices as a use case, but as a functional requirement, it was the very top. So people seem to be a little bit divided on what they wanted, but they want a toolkit to have best practices. They want quick start guides and tutorials. They would like samples of what other people are doing or templates for doing marketing. They wanted examples of how other institutions are implementing these practices. And then it goes on for quite a while. But they were least interested in forums, listservs, blogs, and Slack channels. So they don't want to talk to each other. They just want your templates. OK, so I ran through that really quick. Just so you know, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to crunch the data. We have the survey data. That was just the initial stuff. We just barely closed it. So we're still crunching a lot of that. And then the third focus group analysis is still being coded. What we're going to do is we wrote an article for performance measurements and metrics. that will be coming out this fall. And then we'll have a second one that will come out later in like winter. It's not yet titled though, so I didn't put it on here. But then we have 3 conferences where we'll be talking about this: the Gray Literature Conference, the Digital DLF Conference in the fall, and then the ARL Assessment Conference. So if you're at any of those, stay tuned for more information coming out. And then we'll be applying for a grant here due in September to build the actual toolkit so that you guys can all use it. That's it. Okay.
We'll hold questions till the end, if that's okay. I hope you remember.
Clearly, I should have worn red. So I'm Nancy Lombardo. I'm from the Eccles Health Sciences Library, and I'm going to talk a little bit about my novel project, Neuro-Ophthalmology Virtual Education Library. It's a little different because it doesn't really have anything to do with cultural heritage or history. Well, there is a little history, but so I've been working on this project for 15 years. We started in 2003, and the URL is novel.utah.edu. It's a library society partnership between my library and the North American Neuro-Ophthalmology Society. It's an open access repository, but it's also a peer-reviewed publishing platform with about 16,000 learning objects. And we create discipline-specific curricula for current medical education. And so our purpose is education and research. And we've also developed some products for sustainability, and I'm going to talk about each of those things. So back in 2000, the year 2000, the library we started a digital video studio at the Health Sciences Library, and we were doing a lot of streaming and lecture capture, which was honestly really, really boring because who would want to watch a lecture in 240 by 320? And as we used to say, yeah, digital video is great as long as there's no motion. So that was sort of the state of digital video at the time. And one of our faculty brought in a bunch of VHS tapes and wanted them digitized, and they contained these eye movement disorders, and they were all really short, narrated videos of these eye movement disorders that couldn't possibly be described without video. And I was very excited because I thought this is what digital video is really about, is short, to the point, brief, targeted. And so that was how I met Kathleen Diggory, who is my partner on this project. She's the head of the Division of Neuro-Ophthalmology at the Moran Eye Center. And it just happened she was working on a textbook, so the library helped her design a CD with color images and video to accompany each chapter in her textbook. And then we decided we needed to do more work together, so we got a grant from the National Library of Medicine for $500,000 for 3 years, which extended into 4 years. And I had 2 co-PIs. One was Dr. Diggory, and the other was Dr. Froman from Rutgers in New Jersey, which was really helpful because they're the content experts and we're the technical experts. And it just so happened that Dr. Diggory was becoming the president of NANOS, the Neuro-Ophthalmology Society. So it all integrated together quite well, and it really helped us recruit contributors for the content. We did get an additional grant in 2008 from Pfizer, and then in 2009, the society started to provide funding. They fund us $40,000 a year, and then we get about $15,000 in contributions from members of NANOS, which has kept us afloat until now. So the way the project works is obviously we have a dam, and we've gone through multiple upgrades, and many of you in this group know about all of the upgrades that we've done through Content DM and the migrations and all the fun that we had moving from one system to another. And then, of course, in 2016, we did move our collections into Solar Falcon, which, of course, is developed and hosted here. And we're extremely grateful, and we love having the opportunity to be part of it. We also have a lot of video in our collections, and so the library, the Eccles Library, had our own video server until 2009, when we were convinced that it was best to move to a centralized server through the university IT, which lasted 3 years. Then we had to find a new host, so we went up to the Health Sciences Center, who had a Kaltura server, where we still actually have a lot of our video hosted, but when Solar Falcon came up, we moved our novel video into Solar Falcon, so that's now hosting all of our video within the records, and so we're really glad to have everything stored in one place. Obviously, we have a lot of really large shared drives that we use to manage and store all of our materials, and we have a very, very small staff. It's myself, and I'm 20%, but really much, much more than that. And then I have 3 or 4 professional staff who total a 0.5 FTE, and that's like web, video, graphics, metadata, I mean, you name it. So, and then I have 1 part-time staff who's 20 hours a week. And so that's our staff. As far as rights, we established early on that when things are submitted to Novel, we have perpetual rights to host those items, but the copyrights are retained by the authors. And Dr. Degree, when she wrote her textbook, she did retain the rights to all of her images, which was such an incredibly smart thing for a faculty, a scientific faculty, to do back in early 2000s. Not that many faculty were demanding rights, and she's been a really strong advocate for that, and I can't tell you how many authors we deal with who did not do that, and then you have to recreate everything that they created for their books. So we're really adamant about the authors retaining their rights. They can reuse anything they want, any way they want. It's their material. However, we do have some faculty, some contributors who don't want to manage their own rights. These are sort of the people who are moving on to emeritus status. And they're like, we just are going to give it to you and you take care of it all. And so we are willing to do that. Everything is licensed through Creative Commons. And we too like attribution. So we do ask that people cite the source when they use our materials. Of course, because it's all health information or health-related information, we also have HIPAA compliance. So all of our authors have to obtain rights from the patients if it's necessary. A lot of the stuff is not necessary, but if a patient is identifiable, they have to obtain rights, and everything has to be HIPAA compliant. So part of the means by which we have managed to last this long is that we have really built a community around this project, and it's primarily been working with the Society Library Partnership, and I would encourage libraries to partner with societies because you have a very cohesive audience right there in the society, and if you can build a relationship with them, it's a lot easier, I think, to build that kind of community engagement. So when we started the project, we established a committee that was a NANOS committee for novels. So this is 20 members of the society who are board-certified neuro-ophthalmologists, and they were there to guide and give us direction. And a benefit to the members is that they can put this on their CV. This is a service to their society. It's showing national impact. And we're all trying in academia, of course, we're all trying to show our value and work toward promotion. And so this is a means for them to add to their CV, and so it's incentive for them to participate, and then allows us to then build relationships. Our contributors are either individuals who are members of NANOS, or we also have some academic eye centers that sort of contribute en masse. We have a textbook, the Neuro-Ophthalmology Clinical Textbook is in our collection. We collect all the conference proceedings, so we host all their gray literature, and then we also have an arrangement with the publisher of their journal so that after a 1-year embargo, we're able to archive all of their journal literature as well. So we're sort of the one-stop shop for neuro-ophthalmology information. So we do, of course, try to track usage, which has not been very easy, honestly. We've collected web statistics from the novel website over the years, but of course we've changed our analytic tools I don't know, half a dozen times, and every time you get a new analytic tool, it's like you're starting from scratch. There's no correlation to what you used to collect, and so it's, you know, you throw up your hands, and it's really hard when you're reporting to an executive board and your statistics from last year and this year, they don't even seem to make any sense, and you have to try and explain and rationalize why. And so that's a challenge for sure. We here had very difficult time getting usage statistics from content DMs, so we really never knew the item level usage, which was very frustrating. And now with Solar Falcon, we're getting some usage statistics, and I know they're building that because we would really like to be able to look at statistics based on the author, because we have a lot of contributors, and to help our authors get credit for their contributions to this project, it would be really helpful if we could give them some very clear usage statistics so that they could report back to their own supervisors and say that there's value in this effort. We do have a pretty stable web user base, and about 50% of our users are international. And so we're going to continue to try and find better ways to get statistics on our collections. In 2007, we established our editorial board. We have 12 members from Nanos. It's international membership. Our chair is actually in Switzerland. We have somebody in the UK, somebody in Canada. And it changes each year. Last year we had 134 submissions that got reviewed. And again, these editorial board members, they get credit on their CV. So this is another incentive for them to contribute, because they can say that they're an editor of a peer-reviewed educational platform that's managed by their professional society, so they get credit, and it's another really nice way for us to build relationships with individual members. And this is also something that I really believe that libraries should be doing, is publishing. So now the library is the publisher, so they submit their materials to us. We manage all of the editorial review process, and when the authors complete, if something is approved, they get a formal letter of approval signed by the editorial chair, and they get a citation that they can plug right into their CV saying that they got a peer-reviewed publication. So this is really nice incentive, especially in medicine. A lot of residents are really looking for ways to get publications, to start to build their CV, and so we feel like we're providing them with an avenue for doing that. In 2006, another committee, the curriculum committee, developed a neuro-ophthalmology curriculum. Now, neuro-ophthalmology, I know most people don't even know what it is, but they're either neurologists or they're ophthalmologists, and they do a fellowship in neuro-ophthalmology. So they're studying the eye and the brain and how they interact and how the eye can signal disorders in the brain. And they felt that there was some inconsistency across the nation in terms of fellowship training, because if you're training under a neurologist or an ophthalmologist, you get sort of a lopsided view of the discipline. So they created this outline to sort of standardize training, fellowship training across the nation. And it was really helpful for Novel, because we saw this as, oh, this can be our organizational schema. This can provide us with vocabulary. This can provide us with structure. And it can also help us target what we want to solicit for new content, so that we can provide content for all of the topics in the curriculum. And so hence we started building what we now call the illustrated curriculum. And we have a linked outline. The curriculum is now a linked website, and we have had the membership, the editorial board, the curriculum committee, the novel committee all go through all of our collections and select just the very best items for each topic. So it's really an added value product. So we've gone through and sifted through and found only the very best and linked them so that a user can just go through the outline and find the best material on those topics. And this is something that's only available to the members of Nanos. So it's behind their firewall, and anybody who's a member of Nanos can use it freely. And so this is something that they get as added value. Since they are funding our project, we felt like it was in our it was right to provide them with this added value product. So again, this is something that sort of enhances our relationship, and this led to a formal memorandum of understanding. So we now have a contract with Nanos for the project. So we are sort of legally bound. We have reached the point where we are now included in the strategic plan of the society, which is, you know, it's just shows the level of commitment, and it makes you feel like you really are important to the society because you're in the strategic plan. So it's important. They're going to continue to invest and to provide time and energy toward our project. So I feel like we've gained a lot of sustainability just through this community engagement. The society is invested in us, and we're invested in them. And so we have become their primary educational project. So we feel good about that. But a couple years ago, the executive board suggested that wouldn't it be nice if we could find some revenue? And that's, you know, all of us in academic endeavors like revenue, you know, like, it was pretty daunting, and they wanted us to come up with a business plan and see if we couldn't find some way to bring in funding. And so we did. We wrote up a business plan, and we went out and sought partners to help us find a method for coming up with a product. And we've looked at that illustrated curriculum as the best potential product to go out to a licensed kind of or fee-based kind of arrangement. But it was really difficult to find anyone willing to entertain. We worked with a lot of people here on campus, you know, no interest. If you can't patent it, and if it's not a gene, you know, they want nothing to do with you. So this is just educational content. So as it happened, and you know, this is really how things work. Kathleen Degree was at a bar with some friends, and one of their friends was down from Jackson, Wyoming, and it turned out he was in Teton Data Systems, which is the the vendor that produces StatRef, which is an online medical resource. And she was like, hey, I have something to talk to you about. And so arranged a meeting, and we met with him. And Teton Data Systems is a fairly small online medical resource vendor. And they were really interested in our project because it was something completely different. And they were looking to kind of expand their scope. And so we actually managed to put together this product which combines the textbook and the illustrated curriculum. It's now a product on StatRef which can be licensed by academic institutions or individuals, but it's primarily academic institutions. And StatRef is a product that really almost every academic health sciences library in the United States already has a subscription to. So it's not something unknown. And so we saw this as the perfect opportunity. And we really mostly market it through the society. So at the annual meetings, you know, we say, okay, everybody remember, we have this product on StatRef. So we want you to go home and tell your library that you want this product so that your students, your residents, your fellows, your faculty can all use it. And so our revenue is growing, and we're actually working on a second product right now. And so we have 3 tiers of access. Okay, time's up. But anyway, so we still have the novel library, which is open access. Everything is in there. It's free to the public. It's open to the world. And then we have our illustrated curriculum, which is only open to the members of the society and is on their webpage so that they feel like they have something, that they've earned something by contributing financially to our product. And then we have the StatRef products, which can be licensed by anyone worldwide, institutionally or individually, which then is starting to send revenue back to Nanos to help cover the investment that they are making. And so honestly, it's the human relationships that are the most important in this project. It's the building of trust, and after 15 years, the library has proved to the society that if you ask us to do something with this digital collection, we will get it done. And the library trusts the society that if we need help with the content expertise, that you are there to help us. And so it's become a really nice relationship between the two entities, and that's how we have gotten where we are. And this is just an elaborate timeline of everything that we've done in the last 15 years. And last year we had 143 countries represented in our users. So we feel like the word is getting out there to the larger neuro-ophthalmology community. That's it.
So I just have one last slide. There was a reason I actually had the slide after Nancy's presentation, and I'm not entirely sure how much I want to go into why I had the slide after Nancy's presentation. Maybe I will just give you a little flavor of it right now. But I talked about this a little bit, that Mountain West Digital Library has been working with some local educational institutions. So we previously were working with a charter school. I think it was the Salt Lake City Academy, to build some resources to help teachers teach K through 12 students. And it was really geared more towards social studies and history of Utah for, I think, 6th, 8th, and 12th graders at that time. And we didn't really get a lot of feedback, but we were able to develop the kind of preliminary lesson plan that they were asking us to develop for them. So then we were actually put in touch by Catherine McIntyre with Axel Ramirez, who is faculty member at UVU, and he teaches students who are getting ready to become educators of K through 12 students. So he wanted us to develop a resource for him using primary source sets that we already have in the Mountain West Digital Library that he could use first to incorporate into lesson plans that the teachers could then use for their students to teach, and that he could actually point them as a resource as educators. So one of the things that we've been working with Axel for a while, and we have a preliminary toolkit ready. Actually, Avalon Snell worked on this a whole lot, and then Teresa's worked on it some, and I've worked on it a little bit as well. And right now, John Wiggins is our web developer, is creating a online resource to house that toolkit. And right now, it's in a very simple format. But one of the things that we've done, we now have a seat around this working group. It is called a Utah History Working Group. Utah History K through 12 Working Group, I believe. And it is chaired by Brad Westwood at State History. And around that table, we have state historians. We have the Department of Education represented. Now we have the Mountain West Digital Library represented. And that's a wonderful thing, because as we go through building a toolkit like this, we want to be in compliance with the standards that the DOE, the Department of Education, has. And we want to be knowing exactly what other efforts around the state that are happening like us, and see where we can form synergies and we're not working on redundant efforts. So knowing when to shake hands when we need to, when to point to each other's resource as a supplementary resource when we need to, and when to collaborate more. So another thing that we are doing with this is we are in conversations with the local Utah Open Educational Resource Group, and they're also very interested in developing resources using primary source materials in digital collections. So the idea right now is we're starting small. It's with Utah K through 12, then we want to kind of transcend outside the boundary of Utah. And really, if you talk about Utah history, you're talking about the neighboring states as well, railroads and the pioneer trails, and all of that come into play as well. But this is something that we're realizing requiring a lot of work, And so we are now looking at grant opportunities, surprise, surprise. So I just have had a couple of preliminary meetings with our grant officer at the Marriott Library, Ambra, and so she has given me some homework, which I'm supposed to look at after this conference and get back to her and see what grants we want to pursue. So that's something that we're going to be doing. Another idea that I had after actually I listened to Nancy's presentation, and she actually came into the library and presented on novel and the project earlier as well. And I don't want to talk too much about this, but one of the things that we were thinking, and I'll just give you a little flavor, is that Mountain West Digital Library, again, is a community partner engagement, and we don't want to be making these decisions by ourselves. So it would be great to have a board. It would be great to actually have all of you sitting on that board and be vetting the information and the resources that go inside that educational toolkit resource. We're not sure what we're going to call it yet. And maybe we have the peer-reviewed process. Maybe MWDL or the board then gets to publish that resource, and we go through the vetting process. So I've talked to Nancy a little bit about this. We've had about 2 or 3 conversations, and we'll be talking more, but this is something that once we develop the idea a little bit further, we'll be placing a call out to the members and see, maybe you'll be asked to submit your CV and sort of your experience with education and primary source sets, and we want to get started with something like this, with that as well. So this was the last slide with the impact theme. Thank you, and then if you have questions, or you can just keep sitting if you don't want to come up front, and I can pass around the microphone if the audience has questions for them, for us. Anna.
I had a question for Nancy. Do you know of any other projects that are kind of so tightly integrating like a digital library and a scholarly society, or is novel the only one? Is novel in that way?
Actually, I did write a chapter recently. Is this on? Yes. And did a fairly substantial literature review, and I found something sort of similar in the field of agriculture. It's not a peer-reviewed digital collection, but it's a digital collection, and they're working with an agricultural society. So that was the closest thing I found, which I honestly don't understand why we aren't out there cultivating these societies, because they are just ready to work with people like us.
For the next conference, I'm going to have a bunch of Snickers bars, and then for everyone that raises their hand for a question, throw that. It's like an incentive to ask more questions and get some sugar buzz, towards the end of the day. All right, any other questions? All right.
I don't need a Snickers bar.
Okay. You don't need a Snickers bar?
I don't need a Snickers bar. In terms of both the Education Toolkit and Novel, I'm curious about what the submissions are. What formats do they come in? Can Content DM handle them when you were in Content DM, or did you need to move to the new repository? What are they? What kind of formats are they?
I'm going to let Nancy speak to that, but I'm guessing digital formats that are living in our, right?
It's really not complicated at all, because most of our submissions are video, and they're educational videos. They're demonstrating something, demonstrating a technique, or demonstrating a disorder, but we also have images. We have a lot of images in our collections. We have a lot of PowerPoints in our collections. We have a lot of PDFs that are scholarly papers in our collections, and those are the 4 primary types of information that we get. So they're very manageable, very manageable.
Anyone else? Any questions for Liz? Or I'm trying to, who else? Me. Liz, me. Any more for Nancy? And of course, if you think of questions later, send them our way, and we will, get back to you.